Um, Hi, Luke. Thanks for helping my project. I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit more about the book you wrote.
Yeah, well, that's it's just a little cookie little book, but I think I've been like a lot of people, fascinated by a lot of like the Elon Musk, SpaceX, space exploration stuff. So I've always, just written little things. It's just like a little self-published thing, but it was fun. It's just kind of, it's fun to, and I think this kind of what a lot of people like about it. It's fun to think about the future and with space exploration being part of it, and then what that might look like or entail. And it's just, that's the basic gist of it. But it's kind of just there's poetry and future predictions, and yeah, it's a silly book, but it was fun to write.
I'll have to read it. I'm sure it's just as fun to read.
Yeah. Email me your address. I'm happy to send you one. You're in Houston?
That's correct.
Nice. I taught fifth grade in Houston for 4 years. We loved it down there.
Which part of Houston?
Cypress Fairbanks was the school district.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the area. But I know it's like really spread out. Where are you about?
Well, my children went to Klein, so right next door.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Yeah. Nice. And you've been doing this. You've been doing this for 900 plus episodes.
Since 2019, I started counting down the days to the end of 2024. So episode 1 was actually 1840, and so I'm like counting down to the end. So.
That's amazing. Kudos to you for sticking to it. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. So can you give me a little bit more information about your background? Kind of.
Yeah. Really. I guess like diverse or eclectic. I was a military brat, so we moved around a lot. My dad was an Air Force pilot, so yeah, we've kind of traveled a bit. And he's actually got some friends who are astronauts or were astronauts. They're older now. So he's had. He went to the Air Force Academy, so I think a lot of astronauts went through that kind of pipeline. So he had some classmates that became astronauts. None that ever went to like moon missions or anything, but worked at NASA and whatnot. So that's cool. And then of course down in Houston, there's a big space presence. But yeah, moved around and taught for a little bit. Like I said, I was in the Air Force for one stint. I'm up here in Michigan now in real estate. But yeah, got a 8-year-old daughter, great kid, and yeah, just living life.
So not to date you or anything, but were you around during the time of the first moon landings?
Ooh, I wish. No, I'll be 42 this year. But my dad was, obviously. So he graduated from the academy in like 65, I think. So that was one like the 4th class or something like that. But yeah, we were just talking about his mom, and she was born in, I forget, 1910 or something like that, maybe a little before. But for her to be around during like basically the first plane flight all the way to, the moon landing, just to have people that have lived through that whole transition is kind of crazy.
It is. I mean, also, just thinking about electrification and the invention of the microwave. I think we take that for granted, but the ability to just put something in a box and press 30 seconds a minute and have it hot when you get out is just amazing.
Absolutely. Well, and I think a lot of people, they point to that. I mean, a lot of people might not understand space exploration on the face of it, but a lot of the technologies that come out of it, like secondhand, I think people probably enjoy or are benefiting from every day. Like, and I don't have a list, but didn't like battery powered tools and stuff like that kind of come out of space exploration because they had nothing to plug the cord into, and now that's just the default. If we never did that, we wouldn't have had the other. And So yeah, it kind of forces you to think outside the box and you know, get the smartest people in the world to stretch their brains, which is kind of cool.
That's true. I mean, like miniaturization is another thing. I mean, computers being huge filling things, and then to say, well, we need to put on this craft and we have to keep it small and light, and it really challenges the design.
That's insane. Yeah, you see the computers they use to put the first people on the moon with the punch cards or whatever, and my dad always, I mean, like the engineers, I mean, we're using like slide rules. I mean, they, you know, the calculators back then were not like they are today, obviously, but just pretty amazing. But I mean, I mean, you probably have more, obviously, after doing a million of these, more insight than anyone you're interviewing. I mean, what's your opinion on why they stopped? Was it you know, financial? Were they not seeing? Obviously, there's a lot of motivation to get to the moon initially, and then after a couple more missions after there, they're just not seeing like the public support, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that a lot, and this is all based upon my perceptions and opinions, not hard, fast research.
Oh, sure.
But you know, there's lots of people who wanted to go to the moon for lots of reasons, but the thing that really funded it was sort of the geopolitical situation at the time, in my opinion. And I think what's amazing is not that we stopped after Apollo 17, but that considering probably the motivations that were really driving it, that we actually had an Apollo 12. You know, because
when you get there, you won the race.
We won the race. Yeah, I know. It's like we kept doing some victory laps. See, we could go back. Right. See, we could do it. We could do it.
Yeah. That is interesting. Maybe why we haven't got it, why we went so much in the beginning. That's true. But yeah, and I mean, obviously, it is expensive and it's tax dollars, and you got to have the support of people to do that. But I think that's kind of a cool reason with the commercial side getting in it nowadays, that they don't have to rely on tax dollars in order for the mission to go. You know, there's other commercial interests that can, you know, fund that type of thing. So that's pretty exciting.
And, you know, also the Outer Space Treaty, meaning that we couldn't claim the moon whenever we got there. I think there's people here in the US that are still kind of wondering, is like, well, don't we go there? Don't we plant a flag? Why can't we claim it?
Right. Yeah. So, well, and it'd be interesting to break down that space treaty and once it gets popular enough, how well that treaty holds up. as in, like, you know, there's been treaties and boundaries on Earth for thousands and thousands of years, but yeah, hopefully it would be really nice to see the new age of space be a more peaceful one, where we're working together as opposed to fighting over, you know, whatever we land on. But it'll be interesting.
You know, there's a lot in the space tree about non-interference, like you can't interfere with other people's activities on the moon. And I think some people see that as being kind of a gateway to pseudo ownership. You know, you have a base, and then around that base, you need to have like a particular zone that's sort of dedicated to use that other people can't interfere with.
Right.
Now you can't maybe sell parts of the moon, but maybe like a condo, you know, you could sell parts of your base, you know, and you know that becomes like a little loophole.
Yeah, not the ground, but everything you built above the ground or whatever type of thing. Yeah.
Right. And then you have effective control over certain aspects of it. I think there might actually be some advantages to this, because I mean, last thing you want is somebody that claimed the moon and do nothing with it, as opposed to somebody that has to actively do something with it in order to maintain their sort of stake.
Well, what, in your opinion, what's the greatest? I mean, what would be the best use of the moon? I mean, is it more just like a scientific, like outpost, almost like Antarctica, or I mean, I think a lot of people look at the moon, and this might have been part of the loss of interest, is I think people want to see what kind of functional use, or how is it going to make their lives better by, people going to their Mars or wherever it may be. Because when they think of moon rocks, I think a lot of people think, they're just rocks, and maybe, so yeah. What would be the best use of the moon to keep people excited and to keep people going back and want to live there, and what kind of timelines are reasonable? It's real easy, I think, to say it's cool, but it's not feasible, or does it make sense, like long term, to think you're going to terraform the moon or another planet. But the same people are probably saying the same thing when people are trying to put a rover on Mars or whatever, or go to the moon in the first place. So it's kind of you got a lot of just perspectives out there.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to cost. There's a lot of things I'd like to try, but the costs are prohibitive. So I wouldn't really give away all the other things I want to try just for that one thing.
If it wasn't a factor, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think just seeing it would be kind of enough. But I mean, the cost has to be low enough where I could justify just seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's prohibitive, then, well, I mean, if you get the cost down, then, everything else, I mean, like the range of activities that become possible just explode. And I mean, it's like Las Vegas, it doesn't make sense to put a city in the middle of the desert, but now that we've got one, now it makes sense to have an airport and tunnels and all sorts of other good stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense until it does. That's true. That'll be interesting. But yeah, cost is definitely. I think that'll be one of the coolest things about people landing back on there, is just seeing it all in like high def. I mean, you got the video from the 60s, and you got the grainy footage, and it's fairly limited. But seeing it, a more expansive view of it and higher definition, I think would be cool. And I mean, there's rovers on the moon, aren't there?
There is. China has a rover on the far side of the moon that's been operating for, I think, over 1.5 years, 2 years at this point.
Right.
So kind of amazing.
That from Mars, and you get little snippets from that. But and I think that's another thing I think people feel like they know what they're gonna get when they get. I think they feel like both are kind of just like deserted. like deserts, kind of, a little bit, but I'm sure that's probably not accurate. But that's it's, I think getting there is the first step to getting people to realize what could be, whether it's making it more of a livable space, which would be cool. But yeah, it's exciting. And I mean, in the end, I think it's something positive and fun that people can rally together and all be excited about the same thing, which seems like it's hard to get everyone on the same page nowadays. But I'm looking forward.
I think a lot of people's excitement is directly proportional to, like you said, the impact on them. And I think part of that impact is their ability to participate. One perception I have of the 1960s was, this feeling that, sure, the astronauts are going to go first, but eventually, this will be open to everybody. And I think the last 50 years of spaceflight have pretty much convinced everybody that they won't ever get a chance to participate. That kind of that thought of this inevitability that eventually it would be open to them, I think has really disappeared. And people, other than diehard space fans like you and me, probably have given up on that.
Yeah, and in person is one thing too. I like predicted that in the book too. Even if they can't participate in person, like if they could participate by controlling a rover or a Tesla bot on the moon or Mars, not directly, but even from Earth, but kind of walk around and explore it that way, would be cool. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of the same feeling as, I think people have felt like they've mapped the entire world and there's not a lot of new stuff to discover. It's kind of that feeling where you're going out into the unknown and trying to see what's out there. But yeah, it'll be cool.
Moby, I like that idea of controlling rovers on the moon. I mean, you could have a few dozen rovers on the moon, and sell the time by like 5-10 minute increments.
Yeah, you get 100,000 rovers on the moon. And in the book I go on, like, I mean, that's perfect, like YouTube content. How many rover AI bot channels could you have? Where exactly? In the book, that's partly how Elon like funds the expedition to Mars. And that's a whole other thing. And how long is it to the moon? Is it a few days, a week? The time to get there?
When we went with the Apollo program, it took 3 days to get to the moon.
Okay.
If you go faster, you get there, of course, faster. The reason it went 3 days is because going at that speed, you're slow enough that the moon's gravity will be able to capture you and you won't shoot past it. If you're going faster than that, you need to slow down. Otherwise, right, you'll miss the moon.
Gotcha. And that's one of the cool things about the moon is it's so close, whereas Mars is like a 3 to 6 month like travel timeline or whatever it may be. So I think Mars, obviously getting people there is important, but it's going to be make a lot more sense if they can ramp up like an AI bot or drones or rovers or whatever, to send those out as far as building that place up, just because they're way more functional and way less needy than people. Obviously, you'll want to get people out there eventually, but to begin with, it could be cool. But yeah, well, what are your thoughts on Elon?
Well, they're complex and evolving. I'm a big Elon fan. I mean, I have a Tesla. I've been down to Boca Chica to see the Starship base from like the road.
Nice.
I went to watch the Inspiration 4 launch back whenever he was talking at the International Astronautical Congress in Guadalajara to announce the interplanetary transportation system. Me and my son and wife went down there to go see that.
That's awesome.
And I like listening to him speak. Battery Day was awesome. AI Day was awesome. So I think what he's doing with SpaceX and with like the Tesla car is like really amazing. I think there's sometimes a disconnect though between what he says and what actually happens, which I think it's like really difficult. And some of it seems to be, just the natural course of stuff, but other things of it seem to be, not really thinking that deeply about the problem so much. And like what I'm thinking about is like the Tesla bot, for example. Having a prototype in a year sounds really amazing. But the argument that you could go from self-driving to a robot, I don't quite see the connection there. And then also having tried out the self-driving, I see a lot of work that still needs to be done there.
It's not.
So, that's part of the thing.
And I think he's talked about this too, is his timelines have always been very over optimistic, but I feel like he's mentioned like almost on purpose, like the whole, if you give yourself a year to do something, it'll take a year. And if you give yourself 6 months, maybe you'll get in 6 months, but maybe you do it in 9 months and you're still, fast tracking it compared to you know, taking your time. But yeah, I agree. Most of his timelines are very optimistic. But I also wonder, it seems like how quickly Tesla and SpaceX have ramped up, if part of that's a result of that. I could obviously see on the consumer side that being frustrating. Ordering a Tesla and then again delayed, or being promised the full self-driving by this date, and then, you know, it's 6 months later. But yeah, he's a interesting cat, and you feel like when you hear him speak and talk, like he's being very genuine and authentic, which is cool to see, especially someone in that position. And obviously you don't know if that's, you know, the case, but yeah, what he's doing, it just feels like he's thinking 30 years in advance. And yeah, it'd be interesting to jump inside of his brain. But I don't know, it's just him and what he's doing. He's easily one of the most fascinating people around. And if you broke out, you know, his top 4 companies, he might be the 4 most fascinating people around as far as what he's doing, engineering wise, and it all feels like it's coalescing to like one point. I mean, they all work with each other, you know. They all I mean, Tesla has, you know, 20 plus companies under its belt, right? It's doing all these things behind the scenes, and yeah, it's just fun. He's just fun to follow and watch, and, you know, see what he's gonna do next or can do next. But yeah, he's an interesting cat.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I had a few questions for you. When did you find out that we're planning to go back to the moon?
Good question. Obviously you had your thing. Some of those documentaries, like the inspiration documentaries, there's been a couple SpaceX and they probably like mentioned it to that, like just off the cuff or whatnot. But it was probably something without, because isn't SpaceX like helping deliver supplies or something like that, or they're using their boosters or rockets or something. So I've heard it. And then there's the first female to step moon. Is that part of that?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, maybe a year or plus ago that was in the headlines. So around that time, maybe a year ago.
And what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's great for all those reasons. I mean, it's really weird that we took a 50-year break. It seems like, even if you just do it once a decade to show people you can still do it. So I think it'll be very cool. And once people get on there and people can see that and get that media or that video from that, and it's higher def and it's more extensive, and compare that to the original, and whoever's in charge comes out with a plan of what they're trying to you know, create, or what they're trying to get out of this experience and how it might, you know, affect the different countries. I think that communication would be really helpful and cool to hear and see. But yeah, otherwise people might feel a little disconnected. But yeah, I mean, between doing it and not doing it, I would definitely rather do it. And I think people, you know, the only thing people say, the reason not to do it is how else those funds could be used. But I don't know if I've seen a good alternative plan for how they could be used that makes sense, or yeah. And you're always jiggling. And it's interesting, the cost thing, and you wonder the more we do it. And I think this might be the most interesting that SpaceX or Elon's done. Those reusable rockets, that's just mind blowing. I mean, to see that thing come back down and land is, it doesn't even make sense when you like look at it. And if they can, like you said, bring space travel, the price point down, that's huge. Just not on the commercial, on the private side. Yeah, get a lot more people excited about it. But yeah, totally for it. I'm just excited to see it happen.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Where do you see humanity in 200 years?
Ooh, I don't know if you want to go there. Hopefully in a really good place. Humanity in 200 years. I would love to say I'd love to see it in a better, more peaceful place. And I don't know, I feel like people maybe aren't gonna change a ton. I think technology is gonna change a ton, and maybe it depends on how we use that tool. If we use it for good or for selfish purposes, and it'll probably be used for both. But I mean, if I have to pick one, and I don't know, I might as well pick that it's going to be much better. But I mean, actually, if you look back, we're in a lot better place now than we were 2,000 years ago. I feel most people would agree with that, just on a day-to-day basis. So I think in any generation, you can look at it and say this is the best of times or worst of times. It's kind of a mindset to some degree as well. But it's going to be great. What about you? What do you think? Someone needs to interview you, because you obviously have the value of doing almost 1,000 of these.
Yeah. I mean, I have what I hope, which is, we're a multiplanetary species. We're pushing out even farther. We've taken care of some of the problems that have plagued us in terms of how do we work together as groups and groups of groups, and kind of be more constructive and spend more time on actually doing things that improve life for everybody, not just move around pieces of the pie.
For Mars, I really believe, or even the moon, I feel it provides a real opportunity. I think I put this in the book, a real nice opportunity for every aspect of American life, whether that's politics or education or belief systems, to kind of start from scratch and really build something with some, I mean, Elon always talks about like first principles, and make sure, how do we do this right from the beginning? I mean, in education or politics, you would think if we saw what the problem is, we could fix that, here on Earth. But once you got a huge ship moving, it's really hard to turn that around or blow it up and start from scratch sometimes. But it would be cool. And I think people will be really interested in see how that happens, how like a new or smaller society, and I'm sure there'd be a ton of different input from everybody, how that starts and grows, and what kind of rules and social constructions would be ideal to make sure that grows in the most positive way. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I think that's great. I'm more interested in capturing your thoughts than.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a more interesting aspect than people talk about a multiplanetary species, just in case we get knocked off on this planet for, you know, ourselves or something hitting us or whatever it may be. But just from an intellectual or philosophical standpoint, I think that would be cool. I mean, it would almost be like a Truman Show of, you know, of like the first, you know, a planet really starting off with the first people, and see how they decided to conduct themselves and what rules they put in place. That's and what would be even cooler is if we learned something from that and brought it back to here on Earth. Yeah, and could gain some from that almost social experiment. Would be interesting.
Yeah, it'd also be interesting to see how open the Martian colonists might be, whether or not they really sort of you know, filter out certain things just to make their situation look either better or worse, or more the same or different. You know, it's kind of.
Yeah. Well, in the book, I predict like how they'll like set up like an educational system and a political system over there on Mars. But yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you have to expect. And it's crazy with Tesla or SpaceX, how close they came to not existing. I mean, both at the same time, I think were like on the verge of bankruptcy or going under, right? And that was only like 10 years ago. And I think the one thing with space exploration, and you saw this with the original moon landing, is it's not always going to go smoothly. And when it doesn't go smoothly, that usually means it goes really not smoothly. And it's a, you know, you're trying to be as safe as possible, but that's not always going to be the case. And I think it'll be interesting how people react to that the first one or two times that happens, and hopefully yeah, and see how that affects the you know, the progress of it, I guess. And maybe the fact that it's partly a commercial venture now, and not just a government one, it might not hinder it as much. I don't know, but that'll be interesting, and I hope it goes as smoothly as possible. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. Another question I had for you is, if you could take a trip to space, would you?
Absolutely. Maybe not when I was younger. Maybe when I was younger, but I'm 40. If the worst happens, then that's a decent way to go out. But yeah, and a lot of people was talking about going there just for the visual. Yeah, I don't know it would just be, I think people want experiences, they want adventure, they want, you know, whatever it may be. But I'd go to Mars, even if, you know, I knew I'm, you know, probably not coming back or whatever it may be. Yeah. Life's too short not to do that given the opportunity.
Well, let's say you go to Mars, or maybe one of your descendants goes to Mars, lives in that city on Mars that's self-sustaining and, you know, large, and it's 200 years in the future, and it's your great granddaughter, and she's now in high school in a history class doing a project about the 2020s.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you hope happens this decade that's worth remembering in 200 years?
Yeah, I think it is happening. A ton of memorable stuff will happen, especially in regards to space exploration. I think it feels a lot of ways. Like I said, I wasn't around in the you know, late 60s, early 70s, but I imagine it probably feels similar, just because, you know, everything's gearing and ramping up towards, you know, a specific goal. And yeah, and being 50 years since we've landed there really has skipped, you know, a whole generation or two. that have experienced anything like that. So yeah, it's kind of happening again, but for a whole new generation. Yeah, I think they'll probably look at this decade as the beginning, I would think. I mean, just seeing everything that's going on. I mean, what SpaceX shot up there, like 60 rockets or missions this year so far, something like that?
I think it's closer to 30, but they've 30. Launched, on average every 6 days of the year, something like that.
For that, I mean, how many years was before 30 rockets were flown? Was it the last 10 years or last 20 years? I definitely hear about it. Maybe it's just more televised or reported now, but it seems like it's ramping up. I had a feeling.
It's funny. I think if you look at the flight rates in the 60s and 70s, like we haven't approached like those numbers yet. It's kind of.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
In the 60s and 70s, those flight rates, what were they? What were they going to, putting satellites out there, or what were a majority of those missions?
I think they were just trying to figure out rockets.
Okay.
Most of them were unsuccessful, I think. Let's see. Flight rates of rockets.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
I was wondering if I could get you some real numbers, because I've seen a chart of it, showing like the number of flights per year. And I remember being surprised by the numbers in the 60s and 70s, but I don't have it readily available.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that would make sense that they're, it'd be interesting to know comparatively successful ones. Because nowadays it seems like the large majority are successful, which is good. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? How are they going to remember this decade?
I think this is going to be the decade that space exploration really opens up, that we become multiplanetary spacefaring. And that's one of the reasons why I want to do this project, is because right now there's enough evidence that both the optimist and the visionary can argue with the skeptic and the person that doesn't think it's going to happen. Once it happens, there won't be any interesting discussions.
Right. Yeah. What do you see as being like on the commercial side? I mean, right now they're supplying like the space station and whatnot, government entities. What do you see as something that's out there that's where they're going to be able to make money to continue to ramp up past, government stuff?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll stumble upon something that exists in these other places that's highly valuable, right, that will justify the investment to get.
Right.
But I don't know what that is. Some people say like helium-3 and fusion reactors, but all that's very speculative.
Yeah. Yeah, and you wonder if once we get on Mars, is it going to be another like, hey, we did it, and then is interest going to wane again for another 50 years? And I have no idea. I'm not an engineer, but just from an ignorant perspective, it feels like getting there is an unbelievable feat, but like colonizing it is a whole other bag of whatever that is going to be equally, or if not more, intimidating. But again, maybe that's the next great challenge, and you need that. You don't want to just go there, but maybe that's so far away, you do need to colonize it, and maybe that's what keeps the interest up, is that you're not just trying to get there, but you're trying to stay there, type of thing.
Absolutely. Well, Luke, I really appreciate your time. I wish we had time to talk longer, but unfortunately, I got to go.
Let me on. You have a great day. Congrats on this. I'll keep an eye on future episodes and keep it up. It's impressive.
And if you know anybody that'd be willing to have a discussion, I got 898 more days to go.
I'll show them the calendar.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.